Okay, we're moving on to the specific types of tissue. So the first one we're going to cover is epithelial tissue. So are you ready to get started? Here are the objectives. Pause and peruse if you wish. Okay, so remember this, the body organization, cell, tissue, organ system, organism. We are focusing on the tissue level and one specific piece, the epithelial tissue. So ready? Okay, remember in the introduction we covered some features of epithelial tissue. It's epithelia and glands, it has an apical surface, a basement membrane where it attaches, it's avascular, right, no blood flow. It goes through a lot of replacement and regeneration. It's named according to the shape of cells and the number of layers, and major functions: protection, absorption, sensation, and secretion. And now we're going to go into detail. So let's move on to the specifics of epithelial tissue. Okay, first, it has an apical surface. So many epithelial cells have specialized surface structures. So not only are they exposed to the environment, either internal or external, they have some specialized structures. So it could be microvilli. So microvilli is where the cell membrane kind of folds like this. And this happens where we have absorption and secretion taking place. It increases absorption. It can increase the surface area by like 20 times. So this is important, for example, in the small intestine where most of the nutrients are absorbed. And then we can have cilia, and cilia are going to move like this, and they're going to move materials across the epithelial surface. So like in the lining of our respiratory tract, for example. Next, the basement membrane. So it's located between the epithelial tissue, the epithelium, and the connective tissue underneath. So it's that basement membrane. It's a network of protein fibers. It provides strength, super important. It resists distortion, so twisting and pulling away. It restricts the movement of big molecules like proteins from connective tissue to epithelium. So there's not a lot of things that can cross that barrier, so it provides some protection. All right, what about renewal and repair? So epithelial cells are lost all the time or destroyed, damaged due to exposure to digestive enzymes. So inside your digestive tract, toxic chemicals, pathogens, mechanical abrasion, simply doing this. Okay, so epithelial cells are required to go through a consistent and constant process of renewal and repair. The continuous division of stem cells located near the basement membrane in the deepest layers of the epithelium is what allows for this repair and renewal to actually happen. So where do epithelial tissues get their nutrients from? Remember, they're avascular, right, with no blood vessels. So how do they get their nutrients? Since they're avascular, they get their nutrients from the apical surface, could be from there, diffusion across the apical surface, could be diffusion across the basement membrane. Okay, wherever it is, it's coming from either where it's exposed on the apical surface or from the deeper tissues underneath through diffusion. How are epithelial tissues named? Do you remember? Based on the number of layers and the shapes of the cells. And we're going to get into the specifics of that real soon. Here we go. Cell shapes. Squamous, thin and flat, kind of look like fried eggs. Cuboidal, kind of looks like a cube, right? So small hexagonal boxes. When at cross section, they're going to look like boxes, like squares. Columnar, like a column, tall hexagonal boxes, and they appear rectangular in cross section. Interestingly, the nuclei are found near the basement membrane, so they're going to be closer to the basement membrane. In cuboidal cells, the nucleus is roughly in the center. Now the number of layers. We have simple, single layer, 1. This type of epithelial tissue is thin and fragile. It's found only in well-protected areas inside the body. So it might line a compartment or passageway, like blood vessels. It's found where secretion or absorption is important. Stratified, on the other hand, is multiple layers, and it provides more protection. So stratified epithelial tissue is going to be found in areas where there is mechanical or chemical stress happening to provide more protection. Okay, now we're going to focus on different classifications of epithelial tissue, and we're going to start with simple squamous. So this functions well for absorption and secretion. Why? Because it is a single layer of cells, so diffusion across that is easy peasy. So, but remember, since it's only one layer, this has to happen in well-protected areas. So it could occur in the kidneys and the nephron loops in the alveoli of the lungs. It reduces friction also, so it can be found on slippery surfaces like lining the blood vessels or the heart. Then we have simple cuboidal. It provides limited protection, so the cell is not as flat, but it's still only one layer. So think again for secretion and absorption. So it's found in a lot of glands and ducts and in part of the kidney tubules. Simple columnar. So again, these are taller cells, so there is a little bit more protection, but again, it's only one layer. Again, secretion and absorption. So this is going to line the stomach, intestinal tract, and a lot of excretory ducts. Stratified squamous. This does provide some physical protection, multiple layers against abrasion, pathogens, and chemicals. So it's going to be our skin, lining of our mouth, esophagus, rectum, vagina, where there's a lot more mechanical stress. And we need to provide some protection against mechanical stress and chemical stress. Stratified cuboidal. This is a rare type of epithelial tissue. It's found in some sweat glands and in some of the mammary glands, but just to talk to you about what it looks like. Stratified columnar, again, this is rare. Parts of the pharynx, epiglottis, anus, and urethra, but again, I really just wanted to show you what it looked like. This is not something we're going to focus on. Pseudostratified, though, is really interesting. Its full name, if we really wanted to call it its whole government, is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So sometimes we just say pseudostratified or pseudostratified columnar. All of the cells are in a single layer. Every single cell contacts the basement membrane, but remember how in columnar epithelial, how the nuclei were lined up nice and neat, close to the basement membrane? In pseudostratified, look at it. The nuclei are like all jumbled all over the place. So all of the cells do contact the basement membrane, but because of how the nuclei are arranged, it appears stratified, even though it's not. Hence the name pseudostratified, fake stratified. So this lines our nasal cavity, our trachea, our bronchi, parts of the male reproductive tract, and you can see that there is structures on the surface, like cilia, to help move mucus along. All right, transitional epithelia. This is unique. So it's stratified, true, and it tolerates repeated stretching. And the appearance changes. If you see the difference between A and B, B is when it's stretched, so the cells are going to appear flattened. When it's unstretched, like A, the cells appear plump and cuboidal. So it's going to line the ureters and the urinary bladder. Why is that important? Well, as more urine is stored, the bladder is going to stretch, and we don't want the cells to break or burst or get damaged, so we want the tissue to allow for that stretching. All right, so what type of epithelial tissue is this? That's simple squamous, one flattened layer. What type of epithelial tissue is this? That's stratified cuboidal, remember, one of the rare ones. What type of epithelial tissue is this? That's stratified squamous, lots of layers, and you look at the top. So at the top you could see those flattened cells, that tells you it's squamous. Underneath, the cells might look slightly differently shaped, but look at the surface. What type of epithelial tissue is this? Well, I could tell you a hint. Look at the surface of those cells, the apical surface. Pseudostratified. Those nuclei look like it's a bunch of layers, but it's not. Did it trick you? Now let's look at glandular epithelia. So we have exocrine and endocrine. Exocrine, the secretions are discharged into a duct that empties either on the external surface, so like on your skin, or an internal surface. The endocrine glands, they secrete hormones, and they don't have ducts. They're just going to release their hormones into blood or tissue fluids. There are three mechanisms of secretions for exocrine glands. So we're going to focus on exocrine glands. We're going to cycle back to endocrine when we do the endocrine system. So let's focus on exocrine. So we have merocrine secretion. Now, merocrine secretion is the most common. And what happens is the secretions happen through the process of exocytosis. So saliva, mucus, sweat, milk. What happens is these vesicles move to the surface, secrete their contents. The cell keeps working, okay? Then we have a mechanism of secretion called apocrine. And apocrine is when part of the cytoplasm is released with the secretions. Now the cell still lives because it's still able to function and get ready for another set of secretions. This also happens with milk and your axillary and inguinal perspiration. And we'll talk about that when we do the integumentary system. So apocrine, it releases not through exocytosis, like a whole piece of the cell with cytoplasm breaks off. And then we have the last type, which is holocrine secretion, and the cell actually bursts and releases the secretions. So sebaceous glands, which produce our skin oils, the waxy coating, they work through the mechanism of holocrine secretion. So this cell does not live. It bursts and releases the secretions. Now there are three types of secretion. So we had three mechanisms of secretion, now three types of secretion. We can have serous secretion. So that's watery. It may have enzymes in it, but it's a watery secretion. So we have the parotid salivary gland, the lacrimal gland for our tears. Serous secretion. It's watery, but has enzymes. And then we have mucus secretion. So it's a thick, slippery kind of mucus. So our sublingual salivary glands do produce mucus. Maybe you didn't know that, but it's interesting. Also, the lining of our reproductive, digestive tracts and the cervix produces mucus, a mucus secretion. And then, not a hard one to remember, a combined. So it has more than one type of secretion. So our submandibular salivary gland and the pancreas. So it's a mix of that watery and mucus. In which mechanism of secretion does the secreting cell die? Do you remember? It's holocrine. Which mechanism of secretion is most common? Do you remember? Merocrine. In class, we'd be doing a bluket. It would be so much fun. All right, there you have it, all about epithelial tissue. And guess what? I hope you learned something new today.